to raise a little money for COVID-19 sufferers. Let me introduce Robert, and we'll get right to it and make him available, and you'll see what he's up to. Robert Richmond is a culture strategist and was the co-creator of Zappos Insights, an innovative program focusing on educating companies on the secrets behind Zappos amazing employee culture. Robert built Zappos Insights from a small website to a thriving multi-million-dollar business teaching over 25,000 students per year. Through his work, Robert has been helpful for improving the employee culture at hundreds of companies. Since then, as you'll see, he wrote the Culture Blueprint, the step-by-step guide to the high-performance workplace. As one of the world's authorities on employee culture, Robert is a sought-after keynote speaker at conferences around the world. It's pro bono today. He's here for you, and he's worked for folks like Google, Toyota, Weston, Eli Lilly, and many others. It's my real pleasure. I call him my brother from another mother. He's an amazing dude. My friend, Robert, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Tim. Thank you to everybody watching. So excited to be here. And I want to start right out of the gate with giving some value to you guys, even if you just stay for 5 minutes right now, which is a meta presentation about how you actually watch these online presentations and these Zoom meetings, and thinking about how do you listen? Because here's the thing. I'm sure you've been on some of these, not in Speak 8, of course, where we've got all these amazing pro speakers, but ones where you're like, when are they going to get to the point? They're droning on. If that's something where you really need the information, I get it. But if not, if you don't have an engaging speaker who really brings you in, leave. Go do something else and better with your time. But if you were going to stay here, there's 2 ways that I know that you can listen. One is to be really focused and really there and present. Otherwise, you're doing something else. You're on Facebook, and then you say, wait a minute, can you go back a slide? But you can't, right? So one is to be focused if it's really engaging. The second, this is a weird thing that I've seen happen within speeches, is that you might daydream, and that's okay, because this presentation in particular is meant to stimulate your thought. I don't have all the answers for you, but if you find yourself thinking of other things, if you find yourself daydreaming, if you find you suddenly get clarity on something and you're like, oh my God, I need to leave, that's part of the intention with this as well. So if you're going to be here focused, and if you daydream with that, that's okay. So let's go ahead and get into this. If you have questions, please feel free, add to the chat as well. Now, I think you know we are living in some really, really weird times. In fact, it brings up my favorite quote from a guy named Hunter Thompson, who said, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. Go ahead and add in the chat right now. What do you think is the weirdest thing happening right now for you? What makes this such a weird time? And as you're thinking about that, as you're writing that, here's an interesting concept to think of through this. Is that we're living in a real-time world. My friend Jim Selman put this really well. And the way that he describes this is he says that the distance between the past and the future are going like this. They're coming together. Like I remember my dad when he said he was at work and they had to FedEx documents, you had days, and then the fax machine made it smaller, and then email smaller, and the distance between past and future are going like this, and we're living in this real-time world, which makes it really weird. And in these times, it's almost like the past and the future are colliding. And how we deal with this is a new test of our skills and how we show up. Our processors are on overdrive, trying to figure out how to deal with this situation. How do we work with this? And we are constantly looking to make sense of things. How do we make meaning out of all of this? I'm seeing a few of these answers, all those Zoom moments, conference, happy hour, all on Zoom. Yeah, it's weird to do this on Zoom. Missing Tinder, online communication in place of face-to-face. Yeah, this is weird that I'm even communicating with you right now this way. It is weird. We are in weird times. And I'm going to propose to you that the answer is nothing. The answer is nothing. You're going to see this in some interesting ways, but I'm planting that seed for you right now. And no, it's not that we have all the answers within, though that is true, I believe. But you'll see this through some of the models that I've discovered working with some of the best corporations in the world. So what we're going to talk about is how to disrupt an industry, how to disrupt your business, and how to disrupt you. And you'll start to see this concept of nothing come through, and how you might think of disruption as something that's really negative to a positive, and learn to embrace these times. A little bit about me, just really quickly. As you heard, I'm a culture hacker. I used to be culture strategist at Zappos. I've had the pleasure of consulting with some of the best companies in the world. And I wrote a book called The Culture Blueprint, The Guide to the High Performance Workplace. And through this experience, I've talked to some of the best companies and I've done some trends. I've seen what works across different companies and a lot of highly innovative companies. And let me tell you what I've discovered. And it may source some big ahas for you as well. The way to describe this the best is the story of the iPhone, that a lot of people don't know what originally happened, which was that Steve Jobs was at a meeting and somebody's phone goes off on the table. And Steve Jobs says, shut that thing down. And it keeps ringing. And he says, I said, shut that down. And Jobs just goes nuclear as this is ringing. Like, I said, shut that down. The guy's struggling with his phone and finally goes, I'm sorry. And finally turns it off and goes, I'm sorry. I hate my phone. And Jobs says, what did you just say? I hate my phone. And then Steve Jobs looks around at the rest of the table and says, who else here hates their phones? And all the hands in the room go up. And that's when he realized it was time to disrupt the phone industry. So that first step is we look for massive frustration. And take a moment to yourself and add it to the chat or just on your own notes if you want to keep it at home. But where is there massive frustration for you? It could be in your personal life. It could be in your business. It could be with your clients. Anything that is. And take whatever that first thing is that comes to mind or sit with it for a second, see what bubbles up. Because when you've discovered frustration, you've discovered gold. In fact, at Zappos, what we realized was when we ran the data that the lifetime customer value of a customer who was a standard customer was about $200-$300. But a customer who had a disruption, who got some kind of mishap, and Zappos made up for it with customer service, their lifetime value went to $1,200. That frustration that customer felt was actually gold for the company because it was a chance to make up for it. So think about, write down that massive frustration that you have right now because that's where you're starting to get into the gold. Now, there were frustrations with other companies, right? People hating taxi cabs, hating blockbuster fees. This is where it all starts with frustration. And then it gets to step 2. This is where the heart of it is, the power of nothing, is that we remove what seems essential. Remove what seems essential. Netflix, what did they do? They took out the store, the DVD store, then they removed the DVD. Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, and they removed cars from a transportation company. Airbnb is the biggest hotel company with no buildings. You'd think that a huge hotel company would need buildings, but they removed what seems essential. And of course, Zappos, the biggest shoe store with no store. Even store, there's all kinds of innovation stories. I won't go into all of them, but I think a really fascinating one is The Real World, one of the biggest reality TV shows that really started it all. And what happened was they created a soap opera and they didn't have enough money, frustration, to pay the actors. So they said, what if we just use real people? What if we remove the actors from a TV show and started an entire industry and phenomenon? Remove what seems absolutely essential. And so how did Apple create the next big smartphone? What did they remove that was really controversial at the time? People hated them for it at the time, but they removed it. Do you see what's missing here? Can anybody see that? If you see, does anybody write in the chat, what is missing from this? What's missing from it? Yes, exactly. It's the keyboard. Fantastic. You guys are on it. Yes. And that was seen as crazy at the time. This was what made a smartphone, was the keyboard. And people lost it over it. But it created a whole new industry by removing what seems essential. And now think for a moment for yourself, again, in your journal or on the chat here. Is there anything that immediately came to mind of what you think is essential? Tony at Zappos had this phrase. He said, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Because oftentimes we think, oh, we're right. This should be happening. But what if it doesn't have to? And we could remove something and make ourselves happy. So again, it might not come to you now. Sometimes people see this and they hear from me with this and they report a day later or a dream later, oh my God, I figured out what I can remove. But write that down for yourself. Remove what seems essential. And step 3 is to create an experience through metaphor. The power of metaphor. Once you see this, you're going to start seeing this everywhere. Like you won't be able to escape it. You can't unsee this now that you're going to see this, is that metaphor is everywhere. It's the power to understand with no explanation necessary. In fact, the way that we understand money, did you know that the only way we only communicate and understand money is through water? Water. You don't believe me? It's water. All of it. Think about this. When you are talking about money, what do you say? You say things like cash flow, income streams, pool assets, liquefy investments, revenue streams, trickle-down economics, flood the market. A salesperson who's great is called a rainmaker. Almost every term that we have for money is with water because we understand water. We don't really understand money. It's too abstract and out there. Same thing with a computer. This was a computer before Apple. This is what Bill Gates was programming on until Wozniak said, what if we took what people know, a typewriter, and put a TV on top of it? And that invented modern day computing. And then they did that again because this is too abstract, just all that code and abstractness. Until Xerox PARC said, what if we do this thing of the GUI, the graphic user interface, and we use these metaphors in here? It's filled with metaphors, files, folders, the desktop, email, trash can. A computer doesn't know what these things are. It has no idea, but we do. And the only way we understand our computer is through the metaphor of a desktop. And the same thing happened with the iPhone. There's more than 20 metaphors in there. I'll just show you a few. When it started off, this was a novelty. We understood this because we understood slot machines. We understood opening the phone. There was no way to explain that at first, but we knew how a door latch opens. And switches, light switches, we understood go on and off. Over 20 different metaphors went into the iPhone so that we can understand it. When we find a good metaphor, if you see some of the best speakers in the world, the Martin Luther Kings, their speeches are peppered with metaphors. If you want to be a good leader, a good manager, and when you have a really great metaphor to explain something, people get things like that without explanation. That's why babies can use iPhones and iPads without even being explained. So start with massive frustration, remove what seems essential, create an experience through metaphor. Again, the power of nothing is removing that essential part. But then the last part is we leverage underutilized system capacity. I know that sounds a little bit out there. Yes, Jesus Christ, use metaphors, stories, metaphors, etc. Great comment. Leverage underutilized system capacity. What does that mean? The iPhone was not the first phone with apps. All these things had apps. BlackBerry had apps. They were all apps. But what did Apple do differently? They tapped into a network of programmers that were doing nothing, the same way Uber drivers weren't doing much, the same way that all these rooms were not being used by Airbnb. It tapped into underutilized system capacity. So think about that for yourself. Is there underutilized system capacity in your own life, in your own business? What is sitting there dormant that's not being used? Again, I'm planting seeds of thoughts here, and I'm going to give you more examples how it relates to my business and potentially to your life. But why I hope you're taking notes through this is that kind of thing that at lunch, dinner tomorrow, it can hit you. Oh my gosh, this is the underutilized system capacity I have right now for my business. This is the thing that I thought was so essential, but is actually not. And it all starts with that massive frustration. Removing what seems essential. It seems essential. Create an experience through metaphor, or explain or lead or talk through metaphor, and leverage underutilized system capacity. And this is the disruption model that I found when looking at the pattern of these companies and how they created massive change. And this is it for a level on industry, but it can apply to our own lives as well. Like I started to see how much it applied to my own life and my own business. But I'm going to pause for a second. If there's any questions, go ahead and ask a question. If there's any comments, feel free to keep doing that as well. You can't throw me. Sometimes when I talk about disruption, I get disrupted in my speech. That's cool. As a comedic improviser, I'm used to rolling with that. So as they come in, I'll take those on, but we'll also get rolling into that power of nothing and disruption in business and in our own personal lives. So getting into disrupting the business. I realized this totally impacted me in my industry and speaking. I mean, clearly it's happening right now. My whole business model just pretty much evaporated because I would travel the whole time. But thankfully, this hit me earlier because what I found was that if I look for massive frustration, what's the big massive frustration in the speaking industry? If we're going to be real, it's not every speaker is great. You know, we go to speeches and we're just bored or not engaged, or, oh my gosh, when can I get out of here? Or it was fun, but it wasn't really relevant. Like, okay, I had a great time, I laughed, but what did I learn exactly? Or we just sat there doing nothing. It blows my mind how many times I speak at events and all the most talented people in the room are sitting there doing nothing in the dark. And that is underutilized system capacity right there. Why are the executives doing all these speeches there? One, they're not trained speakers, but two, they could have done it by a video, and they could have spent that time networking all their people together to actually solve problems. So then what happens if I remove what seems essential? Well, you know what seems essential to me in my business is me. I feel like I seem very essential to the business of me and speaking. But what I found was this model called Open Space, which follows the exact disruption protocol. Those frustrations that I just mentioned, and then removing the speaker, and then creating this, which is an open circle. It's all called Open Space technology, and people come together. And I IMC it, but that's not really doing much. But I essentially set it out where here's the topics. You guys say, what do you want to talk about? What's your name? Choose an area, and they write it down. And they put it on this board. The agenda gets done in 30 minutes. There was no pre-agenda. The leadership just says, we've got to take over this market in 2020, whatever that thing is that the leader knows to take that hill, like the military, and says, I don't know how to do this. How are we going to do this? And then they announce their topics, and then they fill these up. They fill these up with places and times where they're going to have their conversation. And what happens is they then host all these different conversations. They get to choose which ones they go to. So they're engaged. It's relevant because they pick the topics. They don't sit in the dark doing that. They can do whatever they want. And so that massive frustration is gone that happens with the speakers and the executives speaking. We remove what's essential of those speakers. And it's really using metaphor too, because it's the metaphor. They meet in a circle. We're all used to the metaphor of tribes and scrums and people coming together in circles. A bulletin board saying, here, I'm going to speak about this here at this time at this place. And then a marketplace. Everybody understands you just go to the marketplace and to the thing that you want to buy or sell. And the open space is buying and selling ideas. And this is now what I'm doing online. I've transferred this model to doing this online with Zoom and Trello and some other technologies. So I've intentionally disrupted my business where people are saying that they're highly engaged with it, even though it removes me as a speaker, because I remove what I thought was so essential, which is me, the guru, the expert, and leverage that underutilized system capacity of the people in the conference or the organization. So that's the disruption model that I applied to my business. And now I want to talk about how we disrupt ourselves. This is the third area. We talked about the industry and the model. Again, frustration, remove what seems essential, think about what metaphor applies, and are you leveraging the underutilized system capacity? But the power of nothing is in that second step. How do we remove something and see, do we really need it? In fact, one of the most powerful lessons I learned once was when I did the self-development program that was very intensive, and things started to drop in my life. I was dropping the ball on all these things, and I complained to the leader of it. And I said, all these balls have dropped in my life, and I'm really frustrated. And she turned to me and said, great, now you get to choose which ones you pick back up. And it hit me. Oh my God, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. By going to nothing, by going to that default zero state, which we're all kind of going to in a way right now, is those balls are dropping. And now we get to consciously decide which ones we pick back up. So disruption now, for a while now, even before this, I think has happened through the form of distraction. It's your cell phone. It's the alerts. It's the emails. It's somebody else's problems. It's the kids. It's the this on fire. I mean, it is all over the place. And before we totally badmouth it, I want to tell you this isn't a bad thing necessarily. I learned this when I was doing this exercise, punching a bag. Like the coach had me punch the bag, punch, 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 punch. And then for the second exercise, there were two people next to me on the sides, each trying to pull me off of the bag as I was punching it. And at the end of it, the instructor said, which was more fun? Punching the bag by yourself, no obstacles, or two people trying to pull you off the bag? And it was way more fun to have people pull you off the bag. There's a reason we have a goalie in soccer, right? If it was just easy to score, it wouldn't be fun. So before we badmouth and say, oh, this is horrible, how many crazy distractions there are, it's part of the game. It's part of the game of life. And if it was too easy, we'd hate the game. So distraction is the disruptor, and the power of focus is how we get to change that. I think the best example I know of this, again, kind of a metaphor that I'm bringing up, is Andy Petranek, a world-class athlete who would do things like run across Australia in a race. And he would train for 6 hours a day until CrossFit, this is in the 90s, came up to him and said, you know what? We have this 20-minute workout with a stretch and warm up after and before. And you can do better than this. And he didn't believe it. And this is a principle I want you to know as well. If you find yourself thinking about my presentation or anybody else's and you think, do I believe this? Do I not? The only way to really know something if you believe it and change a belief is through an experience, not through thinking about it. So he was smart that way. He said, I don't believe it, but I'm going to try it. And he tried training CrossFit 1 hour a day rather than his 6 hours of training, and he beat all of his time. That's the power of a really, really isolated focus. And there's a great book out there called Stephen Arstall's The 5-Hour Workday. He figured out how to have mass efficiency that freed up people's time and working in just 5 hours a day. It's an incredible book. So what I want to talk about with that is how we positively create disruption. Because it can be fun to think about how we disrupt somebody's business or an industry, but when we think about disrupting our own lives, like, oh God, no, don't change too much with my life. I don't need that. But how do we positively disrupt it is we set an intention and we fight off the distractions. We set an intention and we fight those off. And I'm sure you're saying, oh yeah, that sounded real easy. Like that's just going to happen. I mean, with all the kind of out there distractions and entertainment forms, and they're just right across the hall now. So is our bed if we want to nap. How is that going to be easy? Well, again, I'll take you through something that I learned with each of these things with my Zappos experience with the open space. They all came from me just kind of bumbling through this stuff. And I bumbled through this next solution very oddly, which is, again, we're starting with the massive frustration. The frustration is I want to write this book. I want to create this program. I want to do whatever that thing is. And again, what is your frustration? Write it out here in the chat or write it in your notebook. What's that frustration? You want this, but it's not happening. That's what frustration is. You have this goal, but something's in the way of it, even if it's your own mind. So that's massive frustration that we want to change. And oftentimes what we do in this zone is we go to a pill. We go to get coffee. We go to do something outside of ourselves to try to get there. And boy, I have tried a lot of pills. That's a whole nother story for another time. But it would sometimes like have me feel productive, but not actually be productive, or it would have side effects. But I think the interesting thing about the pill is that it's an actual metaphor too. A pill is a metaphor for change. It's a symbol of change. We take it to change our state from unhealthy to healthy, or from distracted to focus, or whatever that thing is. A pill itself is a metaphor. And it was through that I discovered how to remove what seems essential. So this is where it gets pretty weird. I told you, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. This is about to get weird. If you're okay with it getting weird, write weird in the chat right now. I want to see who's even with us. Are you with us? And if you're off just because you suddenly recognized what you need to do right now, great. Like I told you, if something comes to you, a different idea through this presentation, I get it. Go do it. I'm thrilled that you were inspired. But if you're ready for the weird, I want to hear it from you. Weird, weird, weird alert, weird, 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 ready. Awesome. I love the willingness. So let's get weird. Yes. This is where it gets weird. So I was a film student. I love movies. My favorite is The Matrix. Anybody love The Matrix? I love this film. And I had this weird fascination with wanting my favorite movies to be real. I just like, you ever watch a TV show and you want them to be your friends? I had that with movies. I'm like, why can't I be in The Matrix and have that same adventure? And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I can. Maybe I can actually create that in my life. And I couldn't find red pills, but I found red Tic Tacs, and I made prescription pill bottles. I actually pretended to be a pharmacy and ordered these bottles and made them. And I took them to the weirdest place of all, where you create your own reality, which is Burning Man. Anyone been to Burning Man? It's a weird place where, I mean, they last time I was there, they had a 747, a party on a 747 rolling through the desert. I mean, that's how crazy this environment gets. And you can really do anything. And what I did is I went up to people and I said, hey, I've got the red pill. Do you want to wake up to your reality? And it started these amazing conversations where people would say, oh yeah, and they would take it and they would have a new thought that would come up by taking this pill. And so I got home and I thought, oh, you know what? I bet I could do this with with red vitamins and create a whole experience of it. Because what happened was when I got home from Burning Man, I thought, okay, that was just a fun game. But a woman called me up and said, hey, do you have more of those red pills? I'm like, the Tic Tacs? This was before I got these ones. And I said, yeah, why? And she goes, well, because I'm a psychologist and I'm giving them to my patients and they're having big breakthroughs. I thought, oh my God, this has really gone from the weird world of Burning Man into reality. And that's when I started to create this as an experience. And again, this whole idea of this pill as a metaphor. It's a metaphor for change, even though there was nothing in these are vitamins. They don't really have an impact. The red Tic Tac didn't have an impact. And I would then post on Facebook and say, who wants to take the red pill? And I would send it to anybody who wanted to take it. And then I put them in a Facebook group and said, okay, set an intention and take this and take one for it every day. And one by one, people started to say it would clear their distractions and they would focus. And it would actually shift them on a body level. Sometimes it would bring up tears when they would take it. Sometimes it would bring up the anxiety that wasn't quite surfacing yet to clear out. But they would actually have physical reactions on a pill with nothing in it. Nothing in the pill. Again, the power of nothing. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I could make these? And I called up a supplement company and I said, hey, can I make pills that just have no active ingredients? And they said, that's a placebo. I said, yeah. I said, you can't do that. Those are illegal. I said, what? I said, yeah, placebos are fooling people. You can't do that. I said, well, what if I just tell people on the bottle that there's nothing in it? It's just, an inactive ingredient. They said, nobody's ever done that before. So I said, all right, let's do it. And we made these. I thought, why not combine the red pill and the blue pill? Take them both at the same time, see what happens. That's what Ken Wilber said when he watched it. He said, red pill, blue pill, why not take both? That's what we did in the 60s. And make them purple. And again, it's just brown rice powder. So this is the removing what seems essential is active ingredients because it still works on the metaphor level. What happens when you take a pill, I got one right here if you look at my video right there, is that when you take a pill, even though there's nothing in it on a subconscious level, what does that mean? On a subconscious level, it means change. On a subconscious level, it means commitment because you can't take it back. And people have constantly told me that something physiologically changes. Call it the conscious mind and the unconscious mind connecting. Call it the quantum field. Honestly, above my pay grade. I've studied it. I've studied the placebo effect intensely, but they don't even fully know it. Harvard University is studying this with an entire institute of placebo studies to figure out how to harness the placebo effect. And they found that it's what's around the pill that matters the most. It is who you do it with. It's the intention you set. It's how much you feel the power of the emotion of what you're putting into that pill. It's all these things besides the pill. And so then we actually made them. And the way I named this was I didn't know what to name it. And somebody said, well, you just take the pill to figure out its name. And I swallowed it with the intention to know it. And this name came up, X pill. X being you fill in the blank. You choose what that means. And now since then, people like Jack Canfield, if you know him, have taken it. He took it. It really gets you to think, what do you want? Because when he was about to take it, he's got the messiest office you've ever seen in your life. And so we do this process called the activation that gets deep in touch with the why. Why do you want that, Jack? And he said, because I want to do more research. Great. Why do you want to do more research? Well, so I can write more books. Great. Why do you want to write more books? So I can impact more lives. Great. Why do you want to impact more lives? So I can feel loved. Okay. What if you went straight to what you want? And he took it for this. And he literally was stumbling around and said he felt high. And he said he felt that high for 3 days. And when I've talked to his friends months later, they said there's been a profound shift in him. He used to talk all about the numbers and workshops. And now people can feel his heart when they would meet with him. And he said it was one of the most profound experiences he ever had. Thank you, Stephanie. This woman, Maru, she took it for her spiritual connection. Within a week, her mom randomly said to her, you look like you got your soul back in your body. And again, it's the X pill, meaning it's her intention. It's not mine. There's no dogma. There's no thing to believe. It's simply programming ourselves with this power of nothing. Anita used it to write her book. John Gray used it to write his book. You can set an intention. Another guy used it to lose weight. This was incredible. He took it to get to under 180 for the first time in 10 years. And he is a guy with a lot of willpower and works out a lot. And what he did was he took the pill and said, I will be under 180. And he said, I'm going to test this. I'm going to test if this pill works. And he goes up to the dessert buffet and goes, oh my God. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm like, do you have the willpower He goes, no, I don't need the willpower. I've lost my taste for this. And 3 weeks later, he posts on Facebook that he is under 180 for the first time in 10 years. This guy shaved 30 minutes off his triathlon. I mean, I can go story after story about how people use things to do what they thought was impossible by setting intention, using the power of nothing. This works with an X pill. I've also heard people work with just a vitamin doing it. People share stories with me. They heard this talk and they didn't even need my pill. They used their own. That power of nothing. This symbolizes change. This symbolizes commitment. But it's also using our own mind. What I love when people take it is they don't say, oh, the pill did that. They know that they did that. They know their mind did that. And that's where we're bringing up point number 4, leverage the underutilized system capacity. What's the underutilized system capacity? It's our own brains. It's that 80% we don't use. It's that untapped DNA. What this does, this power of nothing says, oh, we are committed now. Now we can free up this mind space. Because oftentimes people will take it and have a new insight. This guy, Ken Honda, who's like the Jack Canfield of Japan, took it without actually setting intention. He's just like, I want to know what happens if I just take it. And he took it and he had this insight as to why he was never on video, because he was scared of overshadowing his daughter and realized his daughter's amazing. He could never overshadow her, and finally got over his resistance to going on video. Now he's on video. All from swallowing a pill with nothing in it, because it leveraged that underutilized system capacity of our own brain. Yes, this is as weird as it gets, Louise. Thank you. I love hearing you say that. So this is the power of nothing, tapping into that underutilized system capacity of our own minds. This is how you disrupt you. Set that intention. What do you want to do? What do you want to know? What do you want to let go of? People have used it to let go of exes, let go of things that they're too attached to. Anything where you've said to yourself, that seems impossible. That seems impossible. This is how we use the power of nothing. And, you know, it's felt kind of unfair to me to sell. I've sold it at times, but what I do sell now is training. But if you want the pill, send me an email to robbie@xpill.com and I'll send you the instructions of how to get it for free. Because I think that feels better for me. I don't want to just sell you nothing. It feels a lot better to give this to you. And if you want to work with me in a deeper capacity, I'll tell you how to do that. But take this down, robbie@xpill.com. Send me an email and I will show you how to get this nothing for free. So rather than selling you nothing for something, I'll sell you nothing for nothing. Or use your own pill, like I said. So now I ask you again, think back on what we've talked about so far. What seems essential to you? What if you remove it? And if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. Let that sit with you. Let that be with you, because like we do in all communication, we don't know it, but we unconsciously are basically hypnotizing each other every time we speak. Anytime somebody's told you about how much they hate traffic, they hypnotized you into all those times you've hated traffic. We're constantly hypnotizing each other. And what I did was consciously, in a way, hypnotize you into thinking about the possibility, thinking about what's frustrating you, thinking about what you might remove, thinking about what might be a metaphor for your life and where there's underutilized capacity that you just haven't tapped into, and where maybe letting go, finding that nothingness. And so for some people, it's just the space of sitting down and meditating. Or when I want to solve a problem, just being in the shower with no writing instruments, or going out without my cell phone. Or even when I went to coaching school, if you walk next to somebody who's silent, holding a problem in your head, you find a solution more than when we would walk around with the problem by ourselves. Saying nothing, just walking can find a solution. So I've hoped you found that while you might be looking for all kinds of solutions, buying all kinds of things on Amazon.com, that perhaps what you've been looking for all along is nothing. So that's what I've had to share with you here. Please add more comments, add more questions if you have any. Dan, if you want to add any, or Tim, feel free.
Oh yeah, that was amazing, man. Like kind of mind blown as to the power of nothing. So here's one on behalf of those folks that are overly distracted and overly busy and etc. So Robert, how does one ably win back their concentration and win back their time? Because partly for me, it's like, I get it. I understand where you're going and I completely with you, but there's a huge heck of a lot of people that have no way in which to sort of consolidate their thinking and their ability to be in the nothing because they're so full of everything.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because everybody, I think till now, has thought, oh man, if I just had more time. Right. And then you're suddenly given time. It's kind of the way people always say we want a lot of money. And you look at lottery winners who got a lot of money and they've wasted. And we always say that wouldn't be me. No way. That's all those other silly, stupid people. Right. And the same way we probably thought up until now, if I had time, oh man, I'd write my book. I'd learn to speak French. I'd do this and I'd do that. And then when you have time and suddenly what happens? It gets oddly filled up by all these other things or our own distractions or things like this. So it's just step one is recognizing it's really a battle in our own minds. And if we're projecting that onto our spouse, our friends, HBO Max, whatever that thing is, that's not really it. And then what we're doing with it instead is what I would call building a muscle. So the building a muscle means how are you able to focus, even if that focus is literally 5 minutes. If you set a timer and said, I am going to do nothing but this thing for 5 minutes. How is it? It reminds me of the coach at Zappos, who there's this woman who's built like a battle axe, but she wasn't at first. And the coach literally said to her, your first step is to go to the gym, use the bathroom, and leave. That's all her first step was. And so if you're having trouble, it's don't go to the gym and be upset with yourself. This is a metaphor I'm using right now, that you can't lift 100-pound weight. You start with that 5-pound weight. And what level of focus is that for you? Right now, for me, what I'm doing, this is another program that I have that I work on. It's called the 48-hour day. And what I do is I've expanded my focus to 48 hours, which is, you'd think, oh my God, I can't be focused for that. But what's weird is what I do is I'll set a big goal. Like I have this thing called the X-Pill Activation Training course that I just developed, teaching people how to use the X-Pill in their lives, how to use it with other people, with their clients, etc. They can make money using this if they want. And so I developed this over a 48-hour period once I had the notes, and I took the X-Pill for committing to it. And then I used this, which is this 48-hour day tracker, where I started at this time, and every 30 minutes I wrote down what I did. The blue is the night times. And you'd think, I'm not saying I was doing this the whole time, not at all. I would take breaks. I would go on email. I would make sure I would do something else. I slept. I had lunch. But by setting the commitment, being aware of my time and tracking it, I was able to get it done without even staying up all night. And so I think it's more about challenging that belief in your mind that you can't. And what if you just simply did it, even if that starts with 5 minutes?
Wow. And is this applicable to sort of big life things as much as it's applicable to maybe little tweaks in your life? Like, can you explain or maybe extrapolate on the depth of kind of things that you might want to be contemplating?
Yeah, I mean, it applies to everything. I think it's the new skill right now is your ability to focus, because anyone can be distracted. It's just think about it this way: when you're distracted, it's the world kind of using its purposes for you. It's the email that came in from somebody else. It's the news. It's all those kind of things. And there's nothing wrong with those. I like those things. It's just that, are you in charge of it, or is it in charge of you? And by doing something like called the Pomodoro, where you take 25 minutes on and then a 5-minute break, is you're saying, I'm going to do this for this 25-minute period, and then I'm going to have my break and watch the news and whatever that is. So to me, like with all my culture work, it's going from what is implicit to explicit. How are we, what I really realize this comes down to is our belief in ourselves. Because if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you lose belief in yourself. You lose trust in yourself. The same way a kid would lose trust in their parents if they say, I'm going to take you to Disneyland every day, and they never do it. They would just stop believing what they say. And so that's the danger in our own minds. If we say we're going to do something and we don't actually do it, we stop believing our intentions. We stop believing ourselves, and that's where life really starts to break down. But if we build that muscle of believing in ourselves, saying we're going to do this thing and then do it, that's how we gradually can get that skill going.
That's so good. One question here regarding the self-directed conferences. How would a group introduce new material? So material that would have been unknown to them, such as the red pill. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do with this is sometimes it's like an hour in the morning or 2 hours in the morning. Or what I do like to do with events is do a sequence, like a content sequence build in, where it's this week, watch this video, then this video, then this video, this survey, etc. So that by the time they show up to the event, they are boom, ready to rock and roll. So I think, with the video, Khan Academy really did this well. They flipped the learning switch where they realized students are really bored in the classroom, but that's where they need the most help. So they said, okay, watch me on YouTube at home, but come to the classroom and work together with your friends and me so we can solve some problems. And I think that applies to corporate as well. Send those corporate messages in advance by video, let them watch it at 2 a.m. And then when we're actually in person, whether virtually or not, let's actually roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Gosh, that's so good, Robert. We can't thank you enough. I mean, I'm gonna use a pun here. The insights that you provided really were extraordinary. Got me thinking, and man, you got a big brain. So thanks for donating some time, your wisdom, and for something deeply for all of us to be thinking about doing something differently as we get off this particular keynote of yours. So thanks, Robert.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, everyone. And thanks for being here.
All right. Don't forget to donate, everyone. Thank you so much. Hopefully see you in 20 minutes. Ciao.